Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Cooperation on Vocational Education and Training Aspects in EU Policy. I'm Emma Nicol. I represent the Swedish National Agency for Higher Vocational Education, and in just a few moments I will be introducing our guest speaker and workshop leader for this two-part event, William O'Keefe. William will be leading part one, which is today's webinar, and also part two of the event, which is the workshop that will take place on Thursday, this Thursday, 8th of April at 10 a.m. Today's webinar will be recorded and published with subtitles on our website in just a few days' time. And there will be opportunity to submit questions during the webinar. You may write your questions in the chat window, and we will answer as many of them as possible during the Q&A session. More info on that in just a bit. Right now, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our speaker today, the Skills and Qualifications expert, experienced policy officer, William O'Keefe. And with that, I pass the floor to you, William.
Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everyone. So thank you for this opportunity to present to you today, and thank you, Emma, for the invitation to speak. I always think these are worthwhile opportunities to get more information and to connect more between member states and what's going on at EU level. Very often there's opportunities for collaboration, for new projects, to get new information and to link with different opportunities and different activities that are going on at national level and at EU level. So really within what I want to present today, I think there's good information for policymakers, for education and training institutions themselves, for practitioners and teachers and those involved in education and training. So I'll just begin by sharing my slides and just taking us through the agenda. So over the next couple of hours, Emma has already opened the session and made an introduction, and now I just want to take these few minutes as well to go through the agenda. So to begin with, from 10 past until about 10:30, I want to take you through an overview of recent EU policy actions in the area of skills, qualifications and labour market, and just set the scene to let you know what are the topics and areas of priority and the different initiatives that have been launched within the last year to 2 years that are currently being implemented and are currently kind of a focus and priority area for the Commission and the EU institutions that could be of interest to you. Then between 10:30 and 11, I want to have a focus on vocational education and training, and specifically refer to some of the key actions, some new legislation and initiatives in the area of VET, and also have a look just at the ideas, the actions that are focusing on innovation and digitalization in the area of VET, and just again to build your awareness and build your understanding, you know, in these topics that are directly of interest to you. Then between 11 and 11:20, we'll take a short break to have a pause before we come back for a round of questions. So during the course of my presentation, feel free to put any questions you want in the chat bar, or of course just save them afterwards and you can take the floor to ask your questions to me. Then before we wrap up, just wanted to take a brief moment, a short session at the end, just to reflect on the impact that COVID-19 has had on delivery of education and training across the member states at the moment. And I just wanted to present some information and updates and research on the impacts that the pandemic has had on delivery of education and training, and just share some insights and information, you know, that I found that again may be of interest to you, and again refer you to some resources and information if you or colleagues or peers are involved in, you know, forming the response in Sweden to COVID-19, and just as I said, to share these insights as almost a year now into the pandemic. Before we close up then at 12 o'clock and hand back to Emma, I'll be happy to take any feedback from you or requests for additional information. And of course, I can prepare any other follow-up or anything like that, or send additional information that you would be interested in receiving. So that's the agenda, and as I say, really it's about today, this session, the main objective of it is to create awareness and understanding. I really will be presenting a lot of information to you, but I want to present this type of a high-level overview to make you aware of what's going on, and then kind of trigger your interest in these topics and show you how to connect with each of them and get more information. So to begin, we'll look at recent EU policy actions, as I say, in the area of skills, qualifications and labour market. So I've worked in the European Commission in DG Employment, and I previously then in the Ministry for Education and Training in the Ministry for Education and Training in Ireland. And really the files and the topics I want to talk to you about now are those that cross that bridge between the worlds of education and training, including VET and labour market and employability skills. And these topics and these policy areas are the responsibility of, at least 2 different directorates within the European Commission. And this means that the actions and the policies that they announce can come from different DGs, be communicated in different ways, with different titles, and very often they overlap, and very often they need to complement each other, and very often they talk about similar topics, but it can be not always so clear and comprehensible. So I just want to take you through some of the main actions that have been announced by the Commission recently. There's a new Commission in place since 2019, as well as a new Parliament. So they've been taking steps to announce the new era of actions from this new Commission, and they'll be rolled out and implemented then over the next 4 to 5 years. So we'll talk about the European Skills Agenda, the European Education Area, and the Digital Education Action Plan. Each of these 3 actions have been announced within the last year, and now the Commission will be taking next steps with implementation of each of them, working with member states, working with stakeholders and experts to implement each of them and deliver on the the objectives and the ambitions within each of them. Importantly, a development just last week was that the new Erasmus Plus work programme has just been adopted. So the Erasmus Plus, as many of you probably know, is the education and training programme, funding programme for education and training in the European Union. The new work programme has been adopted after quite some delay. Typically Erasmus Plus would have been up and running earlier from the beginning of this year, but just due to political delays and issues with COVID and other logistics, the adoption of the programme has been delayed. But now it's underway, because of course with each of the actions that are announced in the policy actions, they need to be funded, and this will all be made possible through the new Erasmus Plus. So for every point in my presentation where you see it there underlined, I've embedded, when we share the slides afterwards, I've embedded a link in the PowerPoint presentation itself, so that when you get these slides afterwards, you'll be able to click through and get more information on each aspect. And really the new Erasmus Plus is the new document, was just published last week. So I would encourage you really to read it and explore it and see what opportunities and information there are there for you or your organization. The funding has been more than doubled, which is showing a real commitment to Erasmus Plus and to the area of education and training and lifelong learning on the part of the Commission and the member states. So again, this is kind of the final step needed to really get the funding and cooperation in the area of education and training underway. And of course, this Erasmus Plus work programme covers the next year, but the overall budget has been agreed for the next 6 years. So, when you look at all these actions, you need to think in the medium to long term as well, because these policy actions will be implemented over the next 4 to 5 years. So to begin, we'll begin with the European Skills Agenda. So So again, like I say, the title of the action is there in the bottom of the screen and it's underlined, so there's a link that will bring you to more information. And as I say, one of the main purposes of this presentation is that I would encourage you to connect more and find ways to get more information. So you'll see there as well the Twitter handle for the DG Employment, which is the part of the Commission responsible for the skills agenda. So this is just again, information on how you can connect. That's the Twitter handle, and get more information and updates on the rollout of the skills agenda. The skills agenda itself comes from DG Employment, was announced last July, and really the key focus of the European skills agenda is about employability and lifelong learning, and reacting to and responding to the digital and green transitions that are affecting the European education and training systems and labour markets. So as you'll see on screen, there's 12 separate actions announced within the European skills agenda that was announced. Now, for all the other actions that are to come as well, there's a significant number of actions announced within each of them. I won't take you through each of them today because it's just an information overload. But what I would really want to put across is the diversity of actions and the range of actions, and again, encourage you to investigate each and see how they could be relevant to you. They're all going to be at different stages of implementation, some just at inception stage and requiring consultation and looking at feasibility, and others will be more at a more advanced stage, and there may be opportunities for you or your organization to participate. Briefly looking at some of the actions within the skills agenda, you'll see number one is a Pact for Skills. So this is a form of cooperation, a new initiative from the Commission, giving education and training organisations, labour market organisations and other stakeholders in industry and in lifelong learning an opportunity to join the Pact for Skills and commit to supporting skills development across the EU. So it's a form of a commitment, a political commitment, that you want to take part in this pan-European area of initiative to cooperate and support the development of skills, specifically skills that support lifelong learning and can enable people to respond to the digital and green transitions, that support social inclusion, and that support development of digital skills and other priority areas such as gender representation. So this Pact for Skills has just been launched, and as I say, you know, there's an opportunity for organisations and different types of stakeholders and groups to consider signing up and committing to the Pact for Skills. And as a result, then you'll get, you know, be part of a forum, get access to information and opportunities to network and connect with other organisations across the EU. Looking at the European Skills Agenda, I'll also now just give brief mention to number 2, strengthening skills intelligence. This is the key thread that's running throughout a lot of the actions and initiatives coming out of the Commission at the moment, because there's just big interest in capturing big data. So big data is all of the huge amounts of information that are available online and that can be captured and collected to help us understand different trends in jobs, in the labour market, in education and training, and just to be able to understand and anticipate where are the skills demands coming from, what sectors, what new and emerging technologies, and where is the need, you know, what are the needs, and then how can we react and support skills development to support those needs. So the Commission has already begun work on examining job vacancies across the EU, published online job vacancies, looking at the trends, looking at the information within those job vacancies, the skills that are required in those job vacancies, and trying to come up with trends and analysis to begin producing information to begin producing skills intelligence that can be given to education and training providers, given to guidance counsellors, and even eventually maybe condensed into simple messages and information for learners and job seekers themselves. Because there's just this need that to really reflect that the labour market and our education and training systems are changing. The nature of careers and work are changing so quickly and in such a dynamic way. and that it is tricky to be able to manage a career and make education and training choices. So the Commission is really interested in capturing this potential of using big data to produce information that can help this and help people manage their careers and lifelong learning. You'll see at number 4 in the actions, there's a recommendation on VET. I'll be coming to this in more detail later. And also number 10, an action on micro-credentials. I'll be coming to this in more detail as well later on. And also number 11, the launch of new Europass. I'll be dealing with this in some detail later on. So this, as I say, is the first set of the first major action I wanted you to be aware of, the European Skills Agenda. And this importantly is about bridging the gap between education and training and the labour market. And I can come back in more detail to any of these actions that you'll see listed in here during the question and answer session. The next action I want you to be aware of is the European education area. And again, there's a link to the more information on the slide, and you can also follow the Twitter account through EU Erasmus Plus. This in particular does have a higher education focus, and this action was announced by the DG for Education and Culture, and it's about really delivering on a European education area by 2025, and sets out really how the ambitions for transforming the nature of cooperation in the area of higher education in Europe, with setting out a number of key building blocks to this European education area that are all quite inherent. The first is the idea of a full rollout of European universities. So this is an action to establish networks of European universities that are better connected digitally and in the ability to cooperate and support mobility, and to allow students move between the institutions, between the universities more easily, and to offer integrated shared services to those students so that they can access their information and access services, library services, online services that are offered by more than one university, and that together these universities are cooperating to offer more holistic, wide-ranging courses, and of course bringing in the mobility and language skills development aspects. And to complement this idea of European universities, the Commission will also explore the feasibility of the ideas of a European degree or a legal statute. So there's already been a first pilot phase on the European universities. So this is an example of an action that's underway, whereas the idea of a European degree and legal statute is only at feasibility stage, and there'll certainly be consultations and further analysis of this option over the next few years. And again, this is why I encourage you to connect with things like the EU Erasmus Plus Twitter account so that you can get updates and be aware of how these things are moving. The third action is the European Graduate Tracking Initiative. So this goes to the idea as well of trying to understand the relevance of education and training, and looking at the destinations and the outcomes for graduates. And are they successful in their careers, in securing employment, in managing their lifelong learning? And so there's just been first again a pilot phase of a survey of graduates in a number of universities in 11 countries, and this is going to be more rolled out in a more systematic level for surveys across the EU, looking at the destinations and the outcomes for graduates. And again, using the results from the survey to give feedback to the institutions and those involved in designing education and training programs. You'll see here an example of overlap between the actions. So in the skills agenda and in the European education area, they've both announced an EU approach to micro-credentials. So I'll have a more detailed focus on this in the moment. But again, this is just what I wanted to put across to you, that actions can come from different parts of the Commission, but ultimately they do need to be coordinated and overlap. So the micro-credentials was announced in the skills agenda with a broader, wider focus. But here, the EU approach to micro-credentials, it's more dealing with specifically higher education. Then on the lower range of the lower list of boxes, you'll see that there's also going to be work on new cooperation in the area of quality assurance and recognition of qualifications. So this work hasn't been fully defined yet or made clear, but there are always ambitions within the Commission and within the EU institutions to support greater cooperation in the area of quality assurance and to support the automatic recognition of qualifications and learning between different countries. The next action there then is a European Student Card Initiative. So this is linked with the European universities with the idea that there can be one European student card, one digital identity for students, which will enable them move more easily between institutions and that they can always have reliable access to their data. And this will be complemented by the new Erasmus Plus app. And again, this online app will allow people to apply and identify for mobility experiences through one centralized app and one centralized tool using their student card identity, and just that the whole process of accessing their information, applying for mobility becomes more is digitalized and becomes more effective and efficient. And again, the ambition is that there will be wide use of the European Student Card Initiative by 2025, and the new Erasmus Plus app was just launched last month. So really all of this fits within this idea of a higher education transformation agenda, that these elements together will contribute to the development of a European education area. And like I've been saying, do think of all these things in terms of an ongoing process, things that you may need to be maybe interested in being informed of and receiving updates on, and that you should connect with them because there'll be work going on in each of these over the next few years. So we've done the new skills agenda, the European skills agenda, and this is the European education area. And then the third action that I want to introduce you to now in this kind of scene setting, the scene setting part of the presentation is the Digital Education Action Plan. So like I said at the beginning, all of the Commission work plan and actions right across all the policy areas at the moment are all influenced by this idea of digital and green transitions. So there was a Digital Education Action Plan first announced back in 2018, and now this has been followed up by a more comprehensive and more wide-ranging second Digital Education Action Plan, which again, and you'll see the rollout of this is planned for 2021 to 2027, and you'll see the Twitter handle. So within the European Skills Agenda and the European education area, there was a lot of political actions, high-level actions, proposals for legislation and proposals for different types of cooperation. With the Digital Education Action Plan, there's obviously a focus on digital education and developing the digital competences of learners and teachers and trainers. But really within this, what makes it quite different is there's a lot of focus on content, on the actual practices themselves of education and training, of the provision of digital skills, of delivering education and training in classroom settings. So this is why you'll see in here that there's ideas for things like online repositories of learning, of tools, of content to support digital education and training. So that really there's lots of content and actions within here that will be directly relevant to teachers, to trainers, to those that are involved in supporting digital skills, but also just more generally in their ability to use digital tools for all types of education and training. Some of the actions that I'll focus within here. Number 8, you'll see that there's a digital competence framework update. So an important tool that again I'll mention later on in the presentation to be aware of is the European Digital Competence Framework, called called DigComp. So this is a European framework that's been in place for a number of about 7 years, which gives an overview of all the digital competences that people need to for work, for life, for acting online, for really making confident and critical use of digital tools and digital technology. So this is a comprehensive overview of, as I say, the digital skills that people need. So this framework has been in place for 7 years, and as part of the action plan, the framework will be updated to include references to lots of new technology like artificial intelligence, dealing with robotics, and kind of other new and emerging technologies that need to be reflected in there. So again, this is just an example of a tool that I provide links to later that you should be aware of. Number 9 is the action that the European Commission will look at the feasibility of a European digital skills certificate. So this is behind the idea that there isn't a single way or a coherent way of describing digital skills across the EU, or being able to issue a certificate or types of evidence that someone has developed digital skills. So right now the Commission is just about to launch a study on the feasibility of a digital skills certificate. So this is a very ambitious action. It looks at the potential, to bring a single approach, a single framework, or a single set of standards to how digital skills certificates are issued by training organizations across the EU, so that basically, it's really so that it's possible for people to be able to simply and easily explain the digital skills that they have, whether they're moving between countries or between jobs or between courses. So again, this is just one of the actions in here that I wanted you to be aware of. You'll see then actions number, say like for number 3, the education content framework and European exchange platform. These are just this idea of a content framework and exchange platform is just at inception, but it is, the idea that there could be an online hub, an online platform that will allow education and training providers, teachers and trainers to exchange here, to share information on exchanging information on developing digital skills. So this is one of the findings that came out of recent research on the impact of COVID-19 is, number 1, just that there's been a lack of experience and readiness to react to the changes that have impacted on delivery of education and training, but also that in particular for VET, that there isn't actually, in existence a number of any platforms or any resources for sharing information or for cooperation between VET providers on online and remote learning. So action number 3 is kind of a key example of an area where the Commission and the EU can bring added value by establishing an online forum for exchanging content on education and training, and specifically on developing digital skills. So really, I've brought you through an awful lot of information here, but as I said, these 3 actions set this scene. So we looked, just as a quick recap, we looked at the European Skills Agenda with the combination of actions. Then the European Education Area with its focus on higher education. And then the Digital Education Action Plan, which very specifically focuses on developing digital skills across the education and training system. So with these 3 actions now, I'm going to focus now on specifically on VET itself. So we'll take, as I say, this focus on VET now will bring us to 11 o'clock, where we'll take a break. So you'll have an opportunity to reflect on the information I've provided. And then I'll be happy to take any of your questions in the next session after the break. So within the European Skills Agenda, one of the actions announced was a Council recommendation on VET. Kind of had the ambition of innovating and making vocational education and training future-proof, just to reflect how people learn and work in the 21st century, and set out really a new ambition for VET. There hadn't been a new legislative action in the area of VET in quite some time. So a Council recommendation, this is a piece of legislation. So the Commission adopted a proposal for a new recommendation last summer, and then just before, in the autumn, in October, the new recommendation was agreed with the member states. So this sets out the new legal text, the new basis upon which VET will evolve and be developed over the next really over, in the long term, this new legislation isn't proposed very often or frequently. So this will be a key reference text for cooperation in the area of VET over the next few years. You'll see really the key areas for cooperation and the key areas for focus in the recommendation. And when you look in the text of the recommendation, there are recommendations both for member states and for the Commission. So beginning up on the top left, as you'll see, really this idea of the green and digital transitions, the green and digital economy. This is at the heart of all of the actions coming out of the Commission and the EU at the moment. And this is one of the key ambitions about seeing that VET curricula, education and training is responding to the needs of the digital and green transition. Then there's also about focus on more on-the-job learning opportunities, particularly through apprenticeships, and in general that there's more cooperation at EU level on apprenticeships, bringing in more practical elements and trying to enable more cooperation and mobility within apprenticeship programs and design themselves. And you see that that's linked to the idea at the bottom in the orange, the idea of creating more mobility opportunities within VET programs. Just that idea, mobility within VET just isn't as, there isn't the same level of mobility within VET programs as there is within higher education and training. So this is about, as part of this action, making mobility for VET students more attractive and more of an option for more learners. Within the action, within the recommendation, learners are put at the heart of the programme, and again it's about opening up the flexibility of VET, giving students flexibility in when and how they study, and really making it respond to the needs of learners and the different styles and the different ways in which people need to access education and training as part of their lifelong learning. And again, as well, a key part of make it more learner-centred and more open is to make it more inclusive, that VET is seen as a viable opportunity, an attractive opportunity, and that there are no barriers for people with any accessibility needs or special needs. And then finally, again, with the focus on the institutions, the providers, the education and training providers themselves, there's going to be actions to increase the resilience and digital readiness of the VET institutions and trainers. And there will be a new tool launched called Selfie for VET, which is a self-assessment tool for VET institutions to reflect on the digital competence of the institution itself, the digital competence of the institution in terms of its ability to support the digital skills of its learners, but also to operate digital tools and to use digital tools in their operations and in their delivery of their work. So this tool, the Selfie for VET, is already under development and will be available for use soon. So as I say, I just wanted to give particular focus to this action within the European Skills Agenda because it sets out an important vision, and it's a key text that will be referred to. And the Commission will be working with the member states and the VET working groups and the representatives from the member states over the next few years to make this text a reality. So the text has been, as I say, agreed at political level, but now, of course, the Commission will need to work with member states, stakeholders, representatives to really effectively implement the text. So again, it's just it's one that I wanted to highlight so that you're aware of, because it's going to be fundamental to the cooperation on VET in the next few years. The next action that I wanted you to be aware of, also announced within the European Skills Agenda, is the idea of centres of vocational excellence. So in a way, there's kind of two sides to this coin. I already introduced you to the European Universities Network. So this focusing on European universities and developing a European dimension to higher education and to universities. So this takes a very similar idea and applies this to vocational centres, vocational education and training organisations, and encouraging, providing funding, providing a framework, providing support and resources, opportunities to connect to vocational education and training centres who meet key criteria, and that they become established as centres of vocational excellence because of the work that they're doing in supporting education and training for young people and for adults, in really encouraging innovation, competitiveness, green skills, sustainability and entrepreneurship, and that they are, connecting with industry, connecting with stakeholders, and really developing their programs in a very collaborative way, and really developing, of course, relevant and developing their programs and education and training curricula really, as I say, in this collaborative way that reflects the needs of their local context, their regions, or at local level, and reflects the demands that are coming from the labour market. So it's kind of, as I say, an incentive and an initiative to set out for vocational education and training centres to aspire and to work in this more collaborative way, and to develop really innovative, relevant education and training programs in this collaborative way. You'll see there the potential for the partners, the broad range of partners to take part in the initiative is very wide ranging, because it's built around this idea of collaboration. So it wants the vet sector plus all of the stakeholders connected with the vet sector to be open and to apply. So there's been 2 rounds of this call now, and the most recent call has just been closed and the results announced. So really these centres of vocational excellence are going to form a key part of the delivery of vet programs and cooperation on vet programs across the EU, as I say, for the next 7 years or so, because a key amount of significant funding has been announced for these centres within the new Erasmus Plus programme. So that's the centres of vocational excellence. Then an action I've announced or mentioned a few times previously is this idea of a European approach to micro-credentials. So this was announced in both the European Skills Agenda and in the European Education area. And basically this is going to be, there's work ongoing now. There's going to be a consultation launched soon, which again, you should really look to be actively involved in or consider if this is relevant to you and your organizations. The idea of micro-credentials, which means small targeted courses. So there's a huge uptake in the small targeted courses, whether it's online or in MOOCs. People are earning open badges, people accessing LinkedIn Learning and Coursera. So there's just this real shift and real transition in people taking these short targeted courses, because of course they better suit their life, better suit their way of living, and it's a way to access quick relevant training without having to engage with long-term or more traditional qualifications or degrees. But of course, ultimately, with so much uptake, there isn't a coherent approach to it, so that people may struggle to communicate the value of them, have employers recognize them, have education and training organizations recognize these credentials afterwards. So this approach is going to look at the idea of a European approach to micro-credentials, so that we have one coherent way of describing these micro-credentials that's underpinned by key things like a shared definition, key criteria for how you describe a micro-credential, and then that of course it needs to be linked to quality and proper provision of information to the learner, so that they understand the courses that they're doing. You'll see on the screen is the idea of building blocks. So the Commission has already done a short consultation with some key stakeholders and developed a roadmap. So the roadmap sets out how we can get to this European approach, and they've listed these 9 building blocks. So these should be the minimum of what should be included in the European approach to micro-credentials. There'll be another consultation on micro-credentials during the year. And importantly, when we talk about micro-credentials, we mean across all areas of education and training, including VET, so that the Commission will come with a legislative proposal by the end of this year on what this European approach to micro-credentials would be. And within a legislative proposal like that, again, there's going to be actions and tasks given to the member states, recommending that they consider developing their own national approaches to micro-credentials that are linked with their national qualification systems or their national qualifications frameworks, and that they're underpinned by quality and clear information. So again, I wanted to flag this as it is a key action that is appearing has appeared a lot in the Commission policy communications, and really is something that I think it's worthwhile being aware of. And the consultation on this will be announced, will be launched very shortly. So within this context of the idea of innovation and digitalization within the area of VET, I just wanted you to be aware of the Commission's ambition, which was announced in a communication last month around this idea of Europe's digital decade running until 2030. So again, like I was saying, the idea of a digital transformation is underpinning everything that the Commission and the EU institutions have been doing in their policy actions recently. So this idea of a digital decade sets broad key ambitions on how we want to create a Europe fit for a digital age, and sets key targets for how we need to support the development of digital skills, digital infrastructures, support the transformation of businesses, and the digitalization of public services. And those key 4 areas, as you see, are set out here within this idea of a digital decade, with targets set within each of them. So as you can see, it's very clear that the idea of digital skills really underpins all 4 of them, because of course the idea of digital skills will underpin your ability to use and engage with the infrastructures to work and be active within the digitally transformed businesses, and to be able to use public services. There are 2 specific goals set within the digital skills: to see at least a growth of 20 million of the number of people who as trained, qualified ICT specialists, and making sure that there's a gender representation, equal gender representation within those active within the ICT sector. And then that need of basic digital skills. The reality across the EU is that still 1 in 4 people don't have the necessary basic skills that you need to be able to engage with digital skills and services today. So it set this very ambitious goal that a minimum of 80% of the population need to be able to have basic digital skills. So with this ambition, all of the actions that I've announced, that I've taken you through, the Digital Education Action Plan and the work on digital within the European education area and within the European Skills Agenda, all of these actions will all support the EU work on delivering on this goal of enabling that 80% of the population should have basic digital skills by 2030. So again, it's just important that this has only just been announced. So it's really within the last 2 weeks, this digital decade action has just been adopted. So again, just when you're forming ideas and strategies and targets at national level, or looking for reference points or information, or other projects and ideas that you could collaborate or that you could leverage at national level, or want to take forward work on digital skills or digital training policy, it's just to be aware and to always think that you can refer to the fact that there's such priority and such focus given to this area, this idea of digital skills at EU level within a key communication like this, the digital decade communication. So within this area then of the idea, the importance given to digital skills development, I just want to touch on and describe the number of EU tools and actions that are available and that are being developed, so that you're aware of them. So that if you are involved in anything to do with digital skills training, or education and training, that you can be aware that these tools already exist at EU level or are underway, and that again, just this idea that you could leverage them, see how you can adapt them and use them at national level and incorporate them into your own work. So what I've done here with the pink boxes is try to map out kind of a digital skills ecosystem or a learning pathway, to explain how these tools could be used at different processes, different steps in developing digital skills. So to begin with, the broad idea of development and understanding of digital skills. So I mentioned this tool earlier, DigComp, the European Digital Competence Framework. So this has been in place, as I say, for 7 years, and really there's been a huge uptake and use in this, and the EU is working on this becoming the EU standards, the EU tool for describing the digital skills that you need really in all aspects of life. So it's not a tool for describing the digital skills that you need in IT professions or highly specialized skills area. It describes the digital skills that you need for everyday life, and it's mapped across all 8 different levels of proficiency, from the most basic to the most advanced, where you're working more independently, more creatively, and really using these digital tools in the way that you need. So again, you'll see that there's a link to DigComp embedded within the presentation itself. So this really is the starting point. It is, a tool. There are translations of it available in some languages, but the English version is published on the link behind. And it can be really used in all aspects of designing strategy and policy, designing programs, writing learning outcomes, mapping assessment. There's multiple applications, and at the link there's also an implementation guide, which will give, there's over 40 examples of how it's been used already in different cases across the member states. So this is your starting point for development of digital skills. Then in the area of self-assessment, the new Europass platform was launched by the Commission in July of 2020. And within the new Europass platform, there's an e-portfolio tool where people can document and describe all of their learning, all of their experiences in a secure online tool that only they have access to. So the idea behind the e-portfolio is that it encourages people to, as I said, document and understand the value of all their lifelong learning, and then they can use parts, the text in their e-portfolio, to create CVs, create cover letters, and really reflect on their needs, reflect on their learning goals, and to find jobs and find courses. So before the summer, a new feature will be added to the Europass e-portfolio of a digital skills self-assessment tool. So it's in the final stages of being developed now. So within the e-portfolio, you'll see that there'll be a new tool added where people can go in, register, and do a self-assessment of their digital skills and store the results in their e-portfolio. So then, as maybe they'll be directed to new learning opportunities or see a skills gap that they have, and they can, repeat the self-assessment over time and just see how their digital skills are growing. And of course, e-portfolio is available, Europass e-portfolio is available in all the EU languages, including Swedish. So that's the self-assessment element. Then in terms of learning opportunities, or just, courses, accessing information on training, DG Connect, so the directors for digital skills and connectivity, is also working on a digital skills and jobs platform, which should be launched this year. And this is going to be a new online platform, which, as the title says, will specifically have information on skills and jobs, and will be, it's invited member states to develop national hubs or national platforms which collect information on digital skills training at national level that can be connected with the Central European platform. So whereas DigComp and the Europass e-portfolio are both in place right now, the digital skills and jobs platform will come later this year. But again, it's important, it'll be an important tool to be aware of. And, it could be interesting to look into who are the Swedish partners already involved, if they are, in contributing to the digital skills and jobs platform. So I hope you kind of see the journey there, that following self-assessment, based on your self-assessment of your digital skills, you may begin looking for learning opportunities or training opportunities. Then moving to the lower part of the screen, we've touched on this already, but just in general, after you've identified a learning opportunity or picked a course, then of course a learner would be involved in education and training, completing their program, and the Digital Education Action Plan, the variety and the range of different types of education and training, the support for teachers, the content, all of that, all those actions are included within the Digital Education Action Plan that I took you through earlier. So really to complement and support anything that's going on in delivery of education and training, really the Digital Education Action Plan is your kind of one-stop shop and a key resource to look at and to engage with when you're following this area, if you're involved in this area over the coming period. Then following education and training can lead to certification. And I mentioned earlier the idea of a European Digital Skills Certificate. So this is only at inception stage. There will be a study to be launched in the next 2 months on the feasibility of this Digital Skills Certificate, like I mentioned. So you'll have opportunity to input into this consultation, and the link behind the Digital Skills Certificate brings you to a community of practice which is run by All Digital. So All Digital is a European network organization for digital competence centres, and they're running a community of practice on behalf of the European Commission, where you can go in and join a discussion board and see about the contributions that have been given to date on the development of the Digital Skills Certificate. And then finally, I want to touch on the idea of credentials. So with a second part of the new Europass that was launched last year is the idea of digital credentials. So the Commission has built a set of online tools and services that enable people to issue digital credentials. What this means is that education and training organisations across the EU can go to the new Europass platform and use these tools and services free of charge to issue digital credentials. So they're tamper-proof digital representations of qualifications. So that you can issue the digital qualification with an electronic seal, an electronic signature, and send it directly to the learner. And then the learner has the digital record of their qualification that they can share with employers or education and training organizations, and that the qualification can be instantly verified. Because typically with recognizing qualifications, it can often be paper-based, and it can be slow and administrative, and it's still a key barrier to mobility in Europe at the moment. But the idea behind digital credentials is that by digitalizing this process, you can speed up the processes of recognition and increase the value and the currency of these qualifications by allowing people to recognize them and verify them instantly. So this is the final step, so to speak, that after you can issue the certificate and design the certificate, and then the final outcome, the credential, the EU is also offering tools that can enable the digitalization of that certificate. So again, I'm very conscious that I really have given you a lot of information in the last hour. This is the last slide now before we conclude. But as you see, I just wanted to demonstrate that on this pathway, beginning with the development and understanding of digital skills, right through to the credentials, the issuing of a qualification, there are tools that are in place already or are being developed that you can explore more, or I can get more information for you after this meeting, that you can potentially leverage and use within your work at EU level, or sorry, within your own work at national level. So will we start with the Q&A?
Yes, certainly. We have 2 questions here. One that's been we received in the chat window from Ulrika. was asking, will there be matchmaking events ahead to find EU partners for joint vet programs?
Yeah, I suppose it's certainly a good idea, and it's worthwhile, and it's always, of course, when you apply for EU projects, they always have to have a transnational element and have partners from one or more countries. So I'm not aware of any of specific matchmaking events, but of course I know that the partners who apply reach out informally through networks and people who put together projects. So I'll look into this and get some advice from contacts of mine and come back with a more comprehensive answer as part of the follow-up to this event. But certainly, you know, I suppose the organizations and companies in countries that typically apply for these types of projects do look for partners all the time, and of course partners with specific areas of expertise. So there's potential for maybe, you know, at national Swedish level, sharing amongst yourselves who's involved and applying for projects and sharing this information with your partners and peers. And then I'll provide more information or advice on how you can connect with potential partners in other countries in follow-up to this. But it is a key part of it, as I say, building the relationships with other applicants and other people involved in projects.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. I've received another question here from Maria via email, and the question is, how can education providers collaborate on adding credibility to different types of micro-credentials?
Well, that really is the discussion that will happen over the next year or so, certainly at EU level, in terms of what is going to feed into the new piece of legislation that the Commission will develop. So there'll be a consultation during which really education and training providers and everyone will be able to have this debate and have this discussion. So really, I would refer you back to what's on the slide in place, in the slide that I've just moved in. So these were the key building blocks that were identified by the discussion group. So there's a roadmap for the European approach to micro-credentials that's been published. A link to that will be included with the presentation. And these 9 building blocks were set out as kind of the key criteria for how we'll need to build the EU approach. But of course, within that, you have the answer: how do you build a national approach to micro-credentials? And even in with the roadmap and with the background note and the other information that's published with it, you'll see there's examples from other countries, actually including Ireland, where I'm from, where they have developed kind of smaller, more targeted, focused qualifications that are included in qualifications frameworks. So if to answer your question, then I would look really at these building blocks in terms of how you can build collaboration between the education and training providers and work towards a shared approach. That's ultimately the key thing. But then with regard to the credibility of them, the key things in there are that people should be able to communicate what the micro-credential is about, and then be able to communicate what the micro-credential is about after they have earned it, and be able to say things like it's underpinned by quality assurance. You can get clear information on the learning outcomes, the duration, including things like recognition, any entitlements coming from it, so dealing with the recognition of it. So really, I would say look at those building blocks here, linking it to on the slide, and seeing how you can link it, how you can adapt existing structures, your existing national qualifications framework, and other national approaches you may have to building and designing qualifications, and seeing how they can be aligned or adapted to building micro-credentials. And really, your question is important because it must be a collaborative effort amongst all the actors, because the whole idea behind the EU approach is that we don't have a diversity of approaches for designing micro-credentials, because then it's just going to create too many diverse systems that don't talk to each other. So really, I'd say look at the roadmap, and with these 9 building blocks that you see here, they should be the key criteria for building the credibility behind micro-credentials.
Thank you very much for that, William. We'll then move on to the next and last segment of today's presentation.
Okay. So this was just, as I say, to touch on a topic which of course has impacted on all of our lives, and just when we were designing the session, we wanted to, you know, really look at those issues and topics which are, you know, really most of relevance now. So we've touched on the policy areas and policy actions, the impact of digitalization, and, you know, set out the, you know, that the funding is now in place, funding program, and the 3 policy areas which set out, you know, the ambition of the EU action. But of course, what impacted upon all of that has been the COVID-19 pandemic, which you know, impacted education and training provision really, you know, since March of last year. So at a point where education and training organizations were, maybe many of them, in the final stages of academic years, coming towards end of terms, coming towards assessment periods, and also periods, you know, for running examinations and the final stages of projects. So particularly for VET, like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, one of the main, the Commission has worked with member states and done some research and done a survey across member states, and there were responses to this from Sweden, and I've shared the link to that in the useful tools and links page there. That really what this has shown is that there is and still is kind of a lack of an outlet, lack of a shared platform or tools or resources for VET providers, for VET education and training organizations to be able to connect, to share best practice, to learn from each other, and to be able to try and react in a way to the impact of remote learning, and just how you can adapt quickly. So I just have shared links again with this, based on a number of pieces of research. So there's been the survey done by the Commission that was linked with VET Week 2020 on how the VET sector has reacted, and gathered together existing useful tools and links, suggestions from the member states on how to adapt to remote learning and operation systems. Sorry, excuse me. And then they kind of shared, gave suggestions of the ways in which the EU could support any of these issues on an ongoing basis, because, as I said, everyone had to react very quickly, and there's been a huge amount of learning done in the past year. So the main findings, and then also DGJRC, which is the research part of the Commission, also did research on the impact of COVID on learning in 5 different countries: Belgium, Estonia, Greece, Italy, and Poland. And the outcomes of all of this has been shared. Ultimately, what we're dealing with is, what UNESCO has found, is that COVID has impacted on, you know, the learning of 1 billion learners in 142 countries. So really, what I'm going to talk you through now are kind of the main areas, the main findings that have come from this, and I suppose the main areas for attention, depending on the medium to long term. I suppose there's been findings of areas that require lots of attention, but there's also been lessons learned in terms of improvements and things that have made things more accessible and open, and you know, have been well received by learners, as well, of course, as the challenges that have been faced. The main so to begin from the top, with regard to online environments, there's been, of course, a huge shift to online environments for delivering education and training, for accessing content and accessing support. And really, there were even examples where telephone calls had to be used in some cases to deliver the education and training and support with the learners. So in general, learners found that it was mostly a positive experience with interacting online, but of course they missed the levels of engagement, and a particular source of frustration was where there were a diversity of tools or apps that had to be used, rather than being able to access everything through one tool or one website or one app. So it required a lot of learning and of course a lot of frustration. And then ultimately this leads to, of course, the issues of the high risks of issues of exclusion for those who don't have access to digital online tools or easy access to them or reliable access to them, facing issues of connectivity and just being simply not able to access all of the content and all of the information that they needed online. The second bullet was really that there was general praise and respect for action across all countries on the responsiveness and the pace of change, that in some ways school systems, vet systems had to change over the course of a weekend, or that systems had to change very quickly because decisions were made on the fly with regard to closing classrooms and closing education and training institutions and shifting online, so that there was a huge amount achieved online. And actually, again, with regard to higher education and the school sector, there really has been more published information and data about how people reacted and changed. So, but the tools and links that I've linked to here include those, the higher education and vet, higher education and schools, but also vet. But again, just there hasn't so much data published on how the vet sector has reacted. Because of the time of the year that it was, as I mentioned, priority really was given to those completing courses and undertaking examinations, and those who would need to kind of access, transfer and progress in their education and training programs and take next steps. And in general, there was also an important focus on ensuring the social inclusion aspect of the social inclusion aspect of the new approach to learning, and making sure that vulnerable groups did get levels of attention. But of course, ultimately, as the year has gone on, this has been difficult to maintain, and there has been issues with people's their progress, mental health issues, and just overriding issues with learner engagement. So, you know, again, just really having an impact on learning. With quality assurance of the countries mentioned in the research and the surveys from the member states, they found that quality assurance could actually be maintained and adapted, whereas very often quality assurance processes and guidelines in some cases, you know, come with a burden and a workload and requirements. Ultimately, the goal of having quality assurance in place was an important one, because it maintained standards, it gave people targets and goals to work towards, such as making sure that, you know, learning outcomes were in place, and, you know, that things could be adapted to make sure that there was still an effective approach to education and training was ongoing for these learners who were affected by the sudden shift to remote learning, so that ultimately this idea of quality assurance continued to underpin the work and kind of gave people a template or set of guidelines to work towards, you know, when dealing with this sudden shift. Of particular impact, I would say, for VET was the fact that there was such an impact on the learning by doing. So this, of course, relates to practical elements, work-based learning, demonstrations, using tools and devices, and being hands-on with your work, which was, you know, hugely affected, that people weren't able to access labs and facilities and tools to learn and do work. So there was lots of adaptation and people being creative and imaginative, and using again online tools, videos, recordings, and giving people more to access the tools that they needed. But ultimately, this has been one of the most significant impacts of COVID on education and training, that the practical element of learning has largely been impossible and very difficult to continue in some cases. So this has impacted on the rollout and the completion of a large number of programs. With assessment, there's been, I suppose, differing feedback on that, in that assessment in some cases shifted to open book assessments, shifted to projects, shifted to different types of assessment, away maybe from the more traditional exam-based assessment. And in many cases, this was actually seen as removing pressures, removing stresses, and that in many cases learners reacted more positively to different opportunities to have their learning assessed. One of the main findings then as well, of course, is that this has all ultimately driven forward, created more momentum for the education and training world to embrace digitalization, to become more digital, to look at the use of digital tools, that even if going forward, if we move out of, as we transition out of the pandemic, that we have learned of the potential and of the relevance and of new ways of engaging and using digital tools to deliver education and training, and of course to reach more, the potential has always been there to reach more diverse and open audiences and support accessibility. And that really this has been the bigger push, and that we've seen the emergence of the platforms and of the tools, and this will continue to evolve. So that this has been the main finding really of the shift towards digitalization and the huge impact it's had on the way that education and training is delivered. And then finally, the consistent message across the research and the feedback from the member states was the need for appropriate support for teachers and trainers, that the institutions and the resources needed were not known and were underestimated, and that really there needs to be effective support for the teachers and trainers to be able to interact, maintain engagement, look after students and follow up with learners, as well as then deliver the education and training, look after their own well-being, and ensure the progression and find new ways to be more innovative and responsive in their teaching style, so that they're able to support their learners. So as I say, I just wanted to give this brief cross-section of the findings that have come, and within the useful tools and links, there is the information, as I say, on higher education and schools, and then the VET survey that was done of member states, and then also done of member states, which includes their suggestions on ways for the EU to support more cooperation on this and supporting remote learning. And of course, all of this is underpinned and featured in the Digital Education Action Plan, which I referred you to earlier. So there's a new impetus and a new urgency around everything that was announced in the Digital Education Action Plan. And then as well, there's also a link to useful tools, resources and information in the links that I've provided with the presentation to support education and training providers. So hopefully these will be useful links for you to use and to share with your with colleagues and peers as well. So as I say, this was just to touch on this topic at the end of the presentation, to give you some insights into the impact of the pandemic on education and training across the EU. Thanks, Emma. So I guess unless there were, I don't know if there were any other questions came in during that last few moments.
No, thanks, William. We don't seem to have any more questions at the moment. I've a message here in the chat window for those of you who think of another question later on that you would like to ask William. There is an email address there that you can send those to. Also, if you would like to join us on Thursday's workshop, please do so in writing to the same email address, and you may do so throughout the day. So I would like to thank William. Many thanks for today's presentation, and I hope to see you again, as I said, on Thursday's workshop. That's at 10 AM. There's still places available if you wish to sign up. And we wish you a great day and see you again soon.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.